Hi, this is my review of Tales of the Dawnline. This book contains several short stories that take place in the setting of the Dawnline role-playing game. If you haven't seen my review of the Dawnline role-playing game core rulebook, I'm going to put a link in the description below so you can check it out. It's a very cool, weird sci-fi, post-apocalypse, Wild West sort of role-playing game. You have vampires protecting humans. They have formed a sort of symbiotic relationship. They protect humans and they obtain all sorts of valuable things for the community, while humans provide blood and sometimes companionship, because as vampires grow older, they start to become a lot more alien. They start to forget what being human is all about. It's a very strange setting. I would recommend that you check out the review of the core rulebook before watching this video, so you get a better understanding of the concepts, because in the world of the Dawnline, there's a constant race or struggle, trying to keep away from the Dawnline, from the light, while not going too far into the darkness. The planet is constantly under this cycle where light and darkness are constantly moving around the planet, and the characters need to stay just in the middle, because if they go too far into the darkness or into the light, they could end up killed, perhaps transformed in weird ways. There are all sorts of alien creatures within the light and the darkness, so it's a very dangerous way of life. Oh, and this video is not going to contain spoilers, so you will be able to watch this video and still get some surprises from the twists, the plot twists, and the different events within the short stories. Now let's get started. Let's talk about the quality first. This book is available as a physical book or as a PDF. I'm going to review the PDF. I only have a major criticism and a nitpick. When it comes to my criticism, is that there are several typos in this book, so it makes a somewhat of an ugly contrast. You are reading this good writing. The writing is perfect. The descriptions, the flavor of the setting is communicated quite adequately, and then you run into these typos and it feels a bit jarring. My nitpick is that the way the paragraphs are aligned, as you are scrolling down the pages, you see the paragraphs sometimes over here, and then the next page the paragraphs are over here, so it sort of creates a sort of displacement effect. So I do not like it too much. It's not going to be too disruptive when you are reading the book, but I felt I didn't like it as much. And so maybe they tried to create some sort of interesting effect with the paragraphs. Maybe it looks a lot better with the physical book, but I didn't like it too much. Now, when it comes to the rest of the book, the quality is really good. Everything is well written. The style is somewhat tongue-in-cheek, with just enough descriptions, not dwelling too much into details. Sometimes there is a bit of dry humor. And when it comes to the aspect of the pages, they look with a sort of weathered look to them, like it's some sort of old parchment. It's in grayscale, so that looks really nice. So overall, despite those criticisms, I would say that the quality is pretty decent. There are no illustrations in this book, just the cover illustration. Now, after a brief introduction to what this work is all about, you start with the tales of the Dawnline. Most of these stories are written by Richard Kelly. I think he's an awesome writer. He's great at describing these weird settings. I'm going to put a link in the description below to some of his other books. His description of battles are also great. But these short stories are a bit more on the mellow side, more philosophical, more reflective. There aren't too many combat scenes. It's more about character interaction and communicating what the world of the Dawnline is all about, how the characters live their everyday lives without dying. Well, the first short story is First Blood. This story is quite good, but I feel like it resembles a bit, it's too close in resemblance to a short story that I saw in the expansion of Feral States for the Dawnline. It's basically a human that has been overcome, overwhelmed perhaps by a powerful emotion. And based on that emotion, he decides to go a very dramatic but expected change within the Dawnline. So here you have an example on how a person goes into very dangerous areas and interacts with a being capable of finishing you off in a second or less, just to go through that change so that that emotion does not affect you further. This is a very short story. Next is the story known as It Rumbles. It Rumbles is about rediscovering humanity, but at the same time, something that was familiar to humans in the past. The setting of the Dawnline feels like many ages ago, life was a bit more normal or more similar to what we experience in real life. So one of the vampire protectors finds this small creature. I don't want to describe it too much because it's going to be quite in the spoilers category. But this small animal, you kind of get the idea of what that animal is. And the vampires are puzzled and intrigued as to why humans feel a certain sort of emotion or act in a certain way towards this apparently newly discovered creature. So it's basically about the community interacting with this small creature and the vampires, trying to come to terms as to why humans act towards that creature like that. So it reminds us that sometimes there could be a scientific explanation as to why we feel attracted to certain things, but there's also like an inexplicable quality to that attraction. The next story, which is Sand, Wind, and Sky, this is probably my favorite of the short stories in this collection. Here you see a former member of the Radiant Cavalry riding his steed that many of you know, those that are familiar with the setting of the Dawnline, they're kind of like these motorized horses, kind of like bike horses or hover bike rather, and they are powered by curse, literally by this energy known as curse. So you see this former member of the Radiant Cavalry trying to outrun or outmaneuver his former brothers and sisters. This is a very good chase scene description. They, as I was reading the chase, I could almost tell what the rider was going to do next, where he was going to turn, and I actually thought at one moment, oh, now it's his best time to attack. So he pulls out his gun and starts shooting. So it's a very intuitive story. So you feel like you're actually there. It's probably one of the best chase scenes that I have seen in literature. Really good one. And there's actually an objective, a reason as to why he has had this fallout with the Radiant Cavalry. After that one, we have Oubliette. This perfectly displays how some emotional and mental problems still happen within the setting of the Dawnline, but also some of these peculiarities of a person, of a particular psychological configuration, and emotional even, could serve as a sort of language to interact with more alien beings. Next, we have a section detailing backer tales, featuring backer tales. These are basically short stories that were commissioned for Richard Kelly to write, to bring them to life. So the first one is The Basin. This is a very interesting story in the sense that it can actually help you build runes as a game master. Runes are quite important in the setting of the Dawnline because they are a source of many things, of ancient technology, of hidden treasures, perhaps even some unusual rations or foodstuff. You never know what you can find in those ruins. They are places that were perhaps at one time very high on the technological level. So many things that could improve your life or even sustained can be found there. But you will never know where these sites, what these sites hold, the sort of dangers that are housed within. And here in this particular landscape, you see a vampire trying to identify the threat of the basin. And as you will see, sometimes the threat is not entirely physical. Next, we have the Oracle Factory. The Oracle Factory, I think this is one of the best stories in the sense that it connects with real life. So basically, it looks like a criticism on trends, on vices, on idolatry, on the sort of cults that could form around different things that are in fashion or that are addictive. So if I speak too much about this, you're going to get the general idea, and I don't want to spoil the surprise. But it's basically that it's a vampire finding this strange artifact, and the thing produced by the artifact can change the way that people act towards each other and even their priorities. It could be quite deadly. Following that, we have the guest starring tales. These are tales written by other authors, and I actually found them quite interesting. They bring a sort of spice to the setting of the Dawnline, because these are not the sort of situations that Richard Kelly would otherwise describe. They do a really good job at displaying how you can play the Dawnline role-playing game however you like. First, we have Cos Way. This short story shows how a character can leave his print or his mark on the setting. Even if that character has died, his legacy, his attitude, even his advice remains as a sort of spirit, and that spirit could guide others into making the right choices. Then we have Entrenched. Entrenched, let me see if it's this correct story. Let me read a paragraph to refresh my memory. I don't remember too much about this one. What was it? I'll see if it returns because right now I kind of like blanked out on this short story. Maybe I'm confusing it with another. Well, after that one we have Stivet and Vuxia. This is a romance story, a very unusual romance. You see how two very different vampires that are even unfathomable in their anatomy can create some very strong connections, some very powerful bonds. This is quite strange because vampires, as I said, as they grow older, they become quite alien. They start to be less affectionate. They lose a bit of their empathy. So in this story, you see this strange, very unusual, some would consider it perhaps monstrous romance between two vampires. And it's basically that, the story of how they came to be. And I think this is good fuel to create characters and build relationships within your online role-playing game sessions. Let me go back to Entrenched to see if I can actually remember what this story is about. Ah, yes, and now I remember why I didn't remember this one. I think this story was a bit too brief, and maybe it's about communicating futility or decadence, but it's basically how a vampire, despite all of her efforts to protect a village, sometimes that village decides to come to a definitive conclusion, or they take a very deterministic decision or choice to the point that the relationship with the vampire is permanently affected. It's somewhat of a sad story in my opinion, and I didn't want to give too much details because otherwise, because this is such a short story, I would be communicating the entirety of the plotline. After that we have Western. And this is perhaps the most action-packed of all of the short stories. Well, it could be comparable to Sand, Wind, and Sky. That's also quite action-packed. But when it comes to Western, it's about vampires sometimes being overwhelmed by the same beasts that they are fighting, that they are supposed to be defeating to protect humans. But also humans sometimes need to get their hands dirty. Of course, they need to take action. And some of the I think the best when it comes to firefights is displayed in this short story. There's a lot of shooting and dodging and running for cover, explosions. So it feels a lot like an action flick actually. And there is an interesting twist by the end. So I don't want to give too many details because I think the twist is quite important, and you could actually use this short story as an excuse for an adventure, in my opinion. Maybe your village interacts with the village that stars in this short story. And by the end, that's basically it. You just have a list of backers and contributors to these short stories, some interesting details about each of the authors. So overall, what do I think of Tales of the Dawnline? I recommend it, but with the caveat that it doesn't have too many battles. I love reading about combat, strategies, and tactics. For example, when comparing this book to Oubliette, First Steps in the Dark, remember to check out the link in the description below. Oubliette, First Steps in the Dark, had a nice balance of this sort of philosophical moments, and then you had battles, really awesome battles. And then you had mysteries, and then you had battles again. So it created a really nice balance. But Tales of the Dawnline, it feels a bit more mellow, more philosophical, reflective. So this is a sort of collection of short stories that you would read perhaps on a quiet evening, like perhaps it's raining or you're drinking your favorite hot drink or whatever. So it's to set that mood. There are, as I mentioned, there are a couple of stories that have quite a bit of action, some cool battles, but for the most part, it's about getting to know the world of the Dawnline, how both vampires and humans and other stranger creatures live their everyday life, try to survive. So in that regard, if you're looking for non-stop action, maybe you won't like the Tales of the Dawnline. But like I said, if you want something a bit more mellow, more reflective, something that could give you some food for thought or meditation, then I would recommend that you get Tales of the Dawnline. And that's it. Thanks for watching my review. And thanks to those that have been sending Drive-Thru RPG gift certificates to support the channel. If someone wants to further support the channel, all the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thanks for watching, and if you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.